All right, Felipe, obviously it's been a very busy offseason for Atlanta United. They came in with a whole bunch of question marks, a whole bunch of things to fill. And now a lot of those questions have been answered. We'll get into the specifics of each signing and person that they decided to hire. But just what can you say about this offseason for them? We knew it was going to be an important one. And how do you think they have done so far?
No, you're right. I think Atlanta United's front office delivered. They've been saying for the last few months, leading up to the end of the 2024 season, when it got really good for Atlanta United, they were already pointing at 2025 as being, I think, their year. Whether or not this is a year where they win a title again, we're going to have to wait and see how all these players and the new coach, Ronnie Dela, come together. But I think from a window and a transfer fee and an acquisition perspective, Garth Lagerwey, the CEO, delivered on his promise. He did say that they would reload, and I think they've addressed some of those holes that you mentioned. Obviously bringing back Miguel Almiron is a big one. They do need a 10. The striker position was one that has been up in the air, so they get that number 9. And Latte Lat coming from the championship in England. And so now you start to see the makeup of a team that should be able to contend in the East.
How much does the frustration of the last couple of years weigh into what they decided to do this offseason? Like you said, they knew that this would be the time it would happen, but do you think that the frustration of the last couple of years, some of the waning support at games, just how it's looked for this team that feels like they're a championship club, you feel like that impacted how much they were willing to spend, how aggressive they were in trying to get new talent and also make the right decision at head coach and sporting director?
Yeah, I think the front office had a couple things they needed to check off the box. First, they had to get the team to be a stronger team. They needed better players. They needed to strengthen the team, the spine of the team. And I think it's still a bit of a work in progress. But to your point, I think they needed a win with the fans as well. And Garth Lagerwey, when Miguel Almiron was presented the other day, last week on Friday, he mentioned that atmosphere when Newcastle came to Atlanta and played Brighton, and the reception that Miguel Almiron got, and it was something that he addressed in saying, like, how do we get this back? And so I think Miguel Almiron is one of those players, and I've said this for a couple of years now, that the fans haven't been able to engage with one player, with a star player like they did in 2017 and 2018. That those teams really left a mark on Atlanta. The fans love those players, and there's been so much turnover. And I think that was something that the front office addressed. They've talked about it. They want to continue to connect with the fan base. They want to bring back players, not necessarily sign players, but keep the players from the past part of the community, part of the brand. So I think that was certainly one that they needed. They need the fans to be excited again in Atlanta.
Well, you mentioned his connection to the city. How important do you think he will be when it comes to actually winning games on the pitch as well? What can he bring? He's still, I think, 30 years old. So I mean, it's not like he's gotten a lot older. He just spent some time overseas. Now he's back. What do you think he can bring now, and maybe how his game has changed since he was last year in Atlanta?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Miguel Marone on Friday said, I'm still young. I'm still a young guy. I'm the same Miguel. And I think he's right. I think at Newcastle, right, he's not 24 anymore when he came to MLS and he was really, hitting his stride. But I think in playing in England, playing in the Premiership, playing with Newcastle, he grew as a player. And I think some of those assets and the characteristics that he has that define Miguel Marone, the speed, the vision, the ability to break down a defense on his own, he still has that. I don't think we saw a lot of it at Newcastle because he wasn't a starter all the time. But if you watch him internationally with Paraguay, that's a team that still likes to build around him a little bit and let him loose. And he's still that player at the international level that can break through a defense with speed alone. So I think that's something that he'll bring to the table. And I think also this really does signify Atlanta United going back to what was working before, that transition game, that high tempo speed type of play style that has changed over the years with different philosophies. So Miguel Almiron, while he may not be the same player from 2017, 2018, he does symbolize that identity that Atlanta United created in those first 2 years.
What's interesting, you see a lot of the conversation about their newest signing in Emmanuel Latte Lat. A lot of people trying to compare him to Joseph Martinez. You mentioned a lot of that speed. He is a speedster. The record transfer fee to be able to get him here. For the people that haven't seen him play, because of course he's been overseas, a lot of people just learning his name now. What do people need to know about his game? Why is he worth that expensive price tag? And what can he bring to this team to bring them back to championship caliber?
Yeah, Atlanta United has flexed their financial muscles before. They own a lot of the highest transfer fees in MLS history. They've broken their own records. And so now, Latte Lath is that player that now symbolizes this new era in Atlanta and in a new era in MLS where more teams are spending money. But I think in Atlanta's case, they've spent money. We know they can spend money. Can they win now? Can they win consistently? And I think this player, Emmanuel Latte Lath, there are comparisons to Joseph Martinez. Speedster, the body profile is very similar. He really likes to crash that near post. He creates on his own, sort of out of nothing inside the penalty area. So he's that type of opportunistic player that Joseph Martinez was. And I think over the years, Atlanta hasn't found the right number 9, the right center forward to really fit the style of play that they've had. And I think this player does that. He is a player that is pacey, can run at teams. And like I mentioned before, if you're going to try to run transition, you want a striker that does that. So I think in the end, the money spent is a big deal. It's $22 million for a player that you could question if he's worth $22 to $24 million, why isn't he playing in the Premier League? And so I think that's a bigger question about MLS transfers. But for Atlanta, it's sort of on brand. They will spend the money if they believe that it'll help the team win.
Why does he call for that much money? Like you just mentioned, I think that is the question mark. Because if he's worth that much money, why wouldn't he be playing somewhere else? Why did Atlanta think that he was the guy versus anybody else that's around the world?
I think his valuation probably says a lot about how Middlesbrough valued him. I mean, he's coming off a successful year. He's their main striker, and also you look at the way the market works. Middlesbrough gets a bid from Atlanta United. They do their homework, their due diligence, and they say, well, this is a team that is used to spending money. I think then it just becomes a negotiation, and the team that's selling is going to try to go as high as possible, and knowing that Atlanta United will pay the money. That's where this negotiation went. Now, I know that they had other options at Atlanta United, but they really wanted this player. Emmanuel Latte Lath, that's the player that they wanted. That's the player they believed would be the answer at that number 9 position. And that's why ultimately they spent the money. But I think it's an interesting story to see how foreign clubs are starting to evaluate Atlanta United, knowing that they have the money to pay for these players, and the price is going to keep going up.
So I guess now the question is, you mentioned winning. This is a group that wants to win. How does it look with the new head coach and Ronny Deila, with these 2 new designated players, as well as the rest of the team that is still here? How do you think it looks going forward?
It's a good question. Chris Henderson, the sporting director, I asked him, are you tempering expectations about Miguel Almiron and this entire team, or is this now a contender? And he sort of pumped the brakes. He's like, we want to contend, but we need to see how this team works. They need to start playing. So I think I can see why they don't want to just come out and say, this is going to be our year. But if you look at them on paper, and that's been the story of Atlanta United, on paper, they look like a strong team. Can they put it together? I think 2025 should be a year where they really improve, where they are in the top 4 consistently in the Eastern Conference. Remember, the top 4 teams host that playoff game, and that's big for Atlanta. So I think we should see a bit of a return to the energy at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the style of play. But you mentioned it, Ronny Deila, he's coming in. He's won MLS Cup before with NYCFC. He has won titles abroad. He's a very experienced coach, but a lot is on his shoulders now. Like, this is a different team. Miguel Almiron coming into a new culture, a new team, and a new coach. And so he's going to have to find answers pretty quickly, because if they start slow, as you know, in pro sports, that's when the questions start to come out.
With Deila, what do you think his style is? How do you kind of see it working? And I thought he had an interesting quote where he said after the first preseason game, he thought it felt boring. I think for fans at home, they probably felt the same way. Does that showcase the type of coach he is, his coaching style, his, I guess, philosophy for trying to win?
I think so. And I think we tend to think, the South American coaches are the ones that really want to push the tempo. He's Norwegian. But he played, and his style of play with NYCFC was very possession based, but attack minded. He had a lot of Latin Americans on that side at NYCFC. He was able to mold that team to their personalities. They played nice football. They really did play some nice soccer leading up to that MLS Cup title in 2021. And so I think he's a coach that I think is just a good man manager. And that was something that he stressed in his opening press conference with us, is that that's something that he feels is his strength. So understanding the different cultures, the different styles of play, I think that's something that other coaches in the past here in Atlanta haven't gotten right, since Tata Martino left in 2019. And so that's going to be big for Ronny Deila. I think there's pressure on him, honestly. It's Atlanta United. You're looking at the window. Everyone is celebrating and talking about this new class. And Ronny Deila is going to have to put it together really quickly.
So I guess now the final question is, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. But you said on paper the team looks good, and obviously the expectations, regardless of how they try to tamper them down, are going to be high. When you compare them to the other great teams in MLS, the Inter Miami's, where do you kind of see them stacking up if they end up living up to the expectations that a lot of people have for this group?
Yeah, I think even though Atlanta United has underachieved over the last few years, they've had moments where they've competed with the best teams in MLS, and they've been that team that teams are like, wow, we don't want to play these guys. Like on a good day, they can really hurt us, and they've shown that. Eliminating Inter Miami last season when they were the best team, one of the best teams in North America, with Lionel Messi breaking records, and they really handled them. Atlanta United really found a way to beat that team, and so I think that bodes well for the players that are still here and for that momentum that they really did, I think, start to build at the end of the season. But we don't know. Like, I think there's a lot of different styles. I think with Miguel Almiron, like, is he a 10? Do you want to play him on the wing? How does Alexei Miranchuk, the Russian player, who's also a left-footed number 10, like, how do they, get together, understand each other? And then the new striker, understanding the movements of a striker doesn't happen overnight. This is going to take a lot of work. And so I think it sounds like it's a lot of like little small details that Atlanta United has to get right in order for this year to be a really nice stepping stone into potentially a championship season in 2026. But I think it's a team that can surprise. A lot of teams already respect Atlanta United when they see the talent that they have on the field.
Before I let you go, I do have to ask, is this going to be different than the other times they've signed expensive players? I think, like you said, sometimes it doesn't work with playing, but also you end up getting guys that end up leaving at a certain point. I mean, who could forget they've lost their two top players this last year who wanted to go somewhere else and ended up being somewhere else. So why would this time be different? And does it help that Miguel wants to be here because this is his former home, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that has changed as far as the front office strategy and player acquisition is Garth Lagerwey has been very upfront about this. He wants experienced players. He wants players that have been around the block, that understand the different cultures, adapting to their country, sort of the rigors of a new league and the expectations of a club that's expected to win. So I think he's checking that off the box. He's getting experienced players. Almiron is one of those players, Latte Lath as well. But to your point, I think in the past, they have sort of failed to put everything together. And so I think when you look at 2025, and the type of roster that they have, one of the things that both Chris Henderson and Garth Lagerwey have told me is they want players that want to stay in Atlanta, that want to really understand the short history of the club, but one that means a lot. Miguel Almiron said in his press conference, I came here and I helped build this club. It was a responsibility that he took seriously. And so that's what made those teams so special. And if this front office can sign players that aren't looking over their shoulder, that aren't looking at the next transfer window, that are looking to win and stay in Atlanta, that's a recipe for success because it's already happened in 2017 and 18. So I think that's the goal here. It may not happen overnight, but that's certainly the strategy from the front office moving forward.
Well, look, I know one thing. It's going to be a whole lot of fun to see how it all plays out. Of course, they're headed to Florida to go through their final preseason games. The opener on February 22nd is going to be absolutely electric against Montreal. It's going to be a very different team than last time, but I'm excited to see it. Felipe, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, man. Thanks a lot.